loud. Okay, there we go. All right, so the topics that came up so far, just write them out in the chat so we'll have it as well. And so we want to talk about lifting state, to a parent component. And then I know Fanny had some questions about some more custom hook stuff, and this would be for 1.5. And lifting the state is from 1.4, is that right? Yeah. And then do you have anything from 1.3 that you'd want to look at specifically for redoing that component, or are you feeling all right about it, Eva?
I'm good. I just need a mental break.
That's
so
great.
I'm
All
sure
right.
I'll figure it out.
All right. Well, we can definitely distract you for a while. That
Okay,
sounds perfect.
good.
Okay. All right. So we've got these topics here. Okay. So I'm going to start with lifting state, just so we're kind of keeping in order of like sooner to later in the assignments. But let me get a replit going. And I was saying before, Eva, that I'm trying to get these sort of a little more organized so that I will put them in a folder that everyone can see, or that I can invite people to, and you'll be able to check the notes from each session. But I pretty often have Replit as my way of kind of like live coding stuff, and now there's also going to be, hopefully these videos will end up on like an unlisted YouTube video that we can send out a link to as well. Okay, create Ripple. All right, so share my screen. Is that working? Okay, are you seeing my editor, or are you seeing this chat?
I have the editor up.
Editor, yeah.
You see the Replit? Okay.
Yeah, Replit.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm still getting used to all the different video conferencing stuff. All right, so when we have things that have their own state, every one of those siblings can have independent state. And so if we were to make a component, and I'll just do this all in one function, all in one page for now, but usually they'd be in their own file, and we'd import them. But I'm going to say we're going to take a counter, and what we want to do is have a value that we're going to adjust with a button or two buttons. Actually, I'll use an input. Okay, can say input type equals number, and then we can return that, and then in here, instead of this main, we could have another div, and we could create counter and see what that does. Okay. Okay, so we have a number input here that we can go up and down. So we could also just have a number and two separate buttons to increase or decrease them. But I think this will just be the easiest way that we can adjust this. So we want to have state in a bunch of different controllers. So one thing that could be helpful is I like to say which component is which. And so this is the app component, and this is the counter component. And so now, every time that we render a new counter, let's say we want to have a bunch of counters, and we want them to be able to each have their own separate number here. So let's introduce a state in each of the counters, and we'll eventually start lifting it out. But in order to lift the state, you first have to have it in the child components. So I'm going to do the thing that I always forget, import use state from React. And now we'll be able to, we're going to use state, and we're going to give it a starting value. And what use state outputs is going to get assigned to some variables. And I know that this is weird here, but does everyone feel okay about the idea of pulling out the first argument of the array that use state returns and calling it the value? And then the second is the set value, and that's a function. So this is weird, and there's other ways to write this. This is just people being lazy, and JavaScript likes to get squashed down. Okay, Eva says thumbs up. How about you, Oksana? Are you feeling all right about the way of using use state and the value and the setter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to rename this to current count. This is sometimes people like to do a current to indicate that something is as part of a state, and then I'll say set current count, and they're all going to be at 0. So right now there's still nothing happening here, but if I were to say I want to console log the current count, then let me put that above here. So this is at 0, and you can see even when I adjust these numbers, nothing is happening to the state. So what do we have to add to this input to make the state actually get updated? What's the technique for capturing a user interaction?
Is it the target dot value?
It's related to that. Yeah, it's an event handler, and so event handler responds to user action. And so yeah, when we write this function, I'll say handle change count. What it is going to get as its argument is the event, and then what we could do is alert event dot target dot value. And so then right now this handle change count isn't, it's here, but it's not hooked up to anything. So where do I put this handle change count to make it hooked up to this input and these user events here?
Inside the input props.
Yes, we make it well, we make it yeah, it's like a prop, but it's an attribute of the input. So it's they are written exactly the same, but props for
Function.
HTML elements equals attributes, and then attributes for React components equals props, and then inputs for functions.
Semantics, argument.
Yeah, exactly, argument, and also parameter. So all of these things are really just the same. We're giving something to a piece of an element or a piece of logic, and it's going to do something with that. It's an input. So we want to add to this input component, we want to add an event handler. So for example, we could say on click, and that's one that you have used before on buttons, and I could pass in handle change count, but I know that that on click is actually not what we probably, oops, I didn't use the right wrapper here. We could put an on click, I guess. Like, so if I click on this, it's going to alert us 8. But what we really want is for when we change the number to alert us to that. So I think that is actually on change. We could look it up, but I think that's right. And so now, okay, yes, it's going to grab 7, and now it's going to grab 6, and now it's going to 999. Okay, so it's taking the event is what gets passed to this function. When the user does something, the on change will say, okay, I'm ready to call the function that I was given, and I know that I should pass it the event so that the software can like respond to more things about it. The event.target is just the input here. If I say like this, object HTML input element, and then the event target.value is what the value currently is inside of it. So we've got that here, and instead of alerting it, what would we want to do to with this value that we have now? How would we tie this into our state?
We will.
Set current count.
Mhm.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so we'll set current count to event target.value. And sometimes people will say, like, you could say next count equals event target value. Like you can make this more potentially more readable like that. It's not necessary, it's not necessary to have this, but sometimes when you just need to explain a little bit more about what's going on and you don't want to add a comment, you can just save something as a variable that has a descriptive name. So I'm going to say next count for here, but it would be exactly the same as saying event target value and passing that in. So now, hopefully, hey, when I update each one of these, it updates the state, and the state can be rendered here. So it's now hooked up properly to the state. And again, what I want to always remind people is that even though these are all the same component that is being rendered here, they each are their own instance of the component, and every instance of a component has its own separate state. So these siblings never affect one another like that. But now we can have as many counters as we want, and we are going to be adjusting their name, their current count as we go. So this is now the state that they're talking about as not lifted, having state in the child components or a lot of siblings. I don't know if there's a good way to describe that, but I think what they're saying here also is that we want to go turn stateful components into stateless components. So what we could say here is that we now have a stateful component, and only the single instance of the counter component knows about its current state. The parent and none of the siblings know about each other. So if we wanted, for example, we've got these counter components, maybe what we want to have is something that depends on all of these different counters. So if we wanted, for example, to say, what is the total count we don't know what we would put here, because that's not a state that we have access to. So the parent doesn't know what the children are doing. They're self-contained. The children can know what the parent is doing though, because you can inherit something from your parent component. So if we want the components to all know about the same piece of information, it usually has to come from the parent instead of living at this lower level in the children. So first off, does it make sense how these stateful components are working, and that there is no current state in the app component here, the parent component? And actually, I might even rename these to child component, and then the app is the parent component. So the parent component has no state right now, but the children do. And if we want to do something in the parent based on all these child states, we need to take these states that live in the child right now, and that's what the lifting idea is, where we're going to take many states from the many children, and we're going to combine them into a single state in the parent. So let's see where I can write that note. When lifting state, from many child components, which are siblings, and we go from no siblings and the parent not knowing the children's state. So this is poorly written, sorry. So after lifting state, the parent will know about all the user interactions happening on the children, and the children can even know about one another. So that might sound a little weird for now, but I'm going to make this into, I'm going to fork this into a separate component, and then we can start to see what I'm talking about here. So what questions do y'all have about what the state is doing so far, and about why we might want to, for example, show all of the total of the current counters in the parent? Like, does that make sense as a functionality that we might want to have? And here we go. Does it make sense that way?
Yes.
Okay, so what we want is, when I change these counters, I want to know up here that this is changing for all of them. So when we lift the state, the way I do this is kind of just remove all the comments that we had in here from this one, and then we'll add a fresh batch of comments as we do more changes. So now, to lift the state, we want to put the state inside of the app, the parent component. So lift the state and make it shareable. And between the parents and all children, one large combined state in the parent component. And then we can remove the state from each of the children. So how are we going to do that? So we're going to, in the app, this is the parent, so we need to define another state that lives in here. So again, we say const, we're going to get an array of stuff from use state, And I'm not going to give it a default value for now, but we will say current counters and set current counters. Oh, sorry, let me close this. How's the size of this, by the way? Can everybody read all right? Let me know if you ever want me to
That's
zoom
good.
in or change things. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to have a group. We're going to have a counter for all of this. So this is similar to your to-do list, and we need to think about how we might want to represent multiple counters like this. And probably the easiest way could be an array. So we'll have an object here, and each item in the array will be an object, and each object will have, let's say, an index and or an ID of ID maybe ID of 0, and then current count of 0. So each one of these, as we add new counts, we want to have these be dynamically rendered so that we just render however many counters we have here written in this data, or maybe we'll need to have an add button or something like that. But the important thing is each one of these will be, all of the counters will be represented in the same space. And for each one of these, we'll be still having them store independent values, but it's going to be stored on the parent now. And I'm just going to start this with everything having 99. So when we start to hook into that number, we'll know it. So, okay, if that's our starting counters, let's say for now, maybe let's hard code this to just have these 4 counters instead of being dynamic. We could add that later, like you have done for your to-do items, but we're going to say there's 4 counters, and for each one of these now, instead of the state living in here, we're going to remove this. And what we will do instead is accept a prop that is the current count. So we don't have to do the it's not really a state anymore. So let's just say we're going to accept a prop called count. So props.count will go here. And then for each one of these, we actually have to pass this along. And so you can see here, we're going to say counters for each one. Actually, I really will just make this dynamic, maybe. Shoot, I don't want to make this overly complicated. All right, we'll just stick with, yeah, we're going to say, okay, current counters, we're going to map them.
Do you want to use yeah, I just wanted to ask you if you want to use map, it's fine.
Yeah, I think it will probably be the easier way to do this. So I'm going to say that that's the counter that it accepts. And this is the callback function here, which we could again define just as a function over here, but I'm going to do it inline, this anonymous function way. Does this has this arrow function syntax been a thing that you all have seen before, and you feel comfortable using that here?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to return a counter component for every counter in that list. And so let's take this for now and hard code it up here as a starting counters. So each one of these is going to get 99. And now what we should be able to see is we will take starting counters and put that as the starting value of the use state. So if I save this out now, okay, so now it knows that there should be 4 counters, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, and not scrolling, okay. And then for each one of these, what we need to do is the counter component now expects a prop, and we are expecting props.count. So down here for each one of these, we'll say count equals the current count, the one we're iterating through, counter dot current count. So hopefully we'll get some 99s here. Yes. Okay, so now for each one of these, we have a separate counter theoretically, but they're no longer hooked up to the user actions anymore, because the user actions were set to adjust the current count here. So what are we going to do to tell the parent about there's a user interaction happening? And this is a little strange, but because you can pass a function to, just like we can pass a function as an argument to another function here, we can pass a function as a prop to a component as well. So for every one of these, we want to have the parent pass the event handler instead. So instead of handle change count, we are going to give this and then on change count. So this will be the current value, and this will be the setter of that current value. So if you think of it as just like we had before with the current state, current count and set current count, we're going to take both of these ideas and remove them up to the parent so that the parent can be in charge of what's happening in each of these components. So this is a little strange, but we're going to do on change count and count. And just like we can pass an on change to a button or to, where is that? Event handler on change. Just like we can pass an on change to an input element, we can also pass an on change to a component that wants it. And so here, instead of saying handle change count, we're going to call props.onChange. And this will be something that lets us modify the state on the parent. And it's a little weird, but just think about, instead of the parent having a value on itself and a setter of that value, which we could still have, like we could put a counter on the parent to change things too, if we wanted. But the important thing is that we can pass down the current value to each child and the setter to change each value to the current child. And so we need those to be independently called each time one of these is updated. And then we want our list in our state to reflect what is currently happening. So it's a little weird, but let's just go through it and see if it can make sense.
So what you're saying, sorry,
yes,
that what we're getting on in props of that in
it's up here.
here it's on change of each one here.
Yes, on change. So what we do, for example, is if we passed each one of these and on, oh, sorry. too many hotkeys. If we passed each one of these the same handler, so I could say on count, on change, sorry.
Yeah.
And I could say, make a function here that says alert, alert child count changed for now. So now on each one of these, I think every time I hit this button, child count changed on any of these children. So that's pretty good so far, but we're going to have to make this based on more, like we want to have the event in here again. And I'm just going to, now that this is getting more complicated, I'm just going to pull it out here to another handler. And usually handle counter change. Usually you use handle means inside of the current component, and on means means a function passed from a parent. So it's a little weird, but this parent has a handle counter change, and the child gets that as an on change. So here I will say handle counter change. And that's a little bit of a strange convention. You don't have to worry about getting these names perfectly, but it just helps you. When I see handle, I know, okay, that's happening in this component. And then when I'm going to the child and I see on change, I know that it came from the props. So that's just like a little way to help keep those straight. But now that we're handling the counter change, nothing's happening here because I deleted this. But if I say event and then alert child component changed, count will be, and I have to make this $signs, and then this will be event target value. So now, hopefully, if I hit each one of these, that says -11, okay. And then if I hit this one upward, it will say -7. So now we can tell what the new value is of whatever counter was changing. We're still not changing anything in this number though, right? So if I refresh these will all go back to 0. And when I adjust it, it's not gonna change this counter yet. So we still have to work on that. But now we have this alert, and let me make this a console log instead, so it's a little less noisy. And I'll open up this console log. So now, if I console log.
Console log. It's up there. This is the console log of.
Oh, yes, I always get this wrong. Thank you.
So
I thought
up there.
Like in here.
No, in
Oh,
right.
okay. I thought that was it. Sorry.
The left. No. On the left of this setting. Yeah.
Left here.
Up there. Up there.
Oh.
This is of this platform, I think, of a Replit.
Okay.
Console of that what we need. It's up there. On the right of URL. Lifting state.
Okay.
Darga Replit.
URL up here.
Right. No. I cannot show you.
Okay, I'm sorry. You can draw on the screen if you want. Usually
here left, on the left one. Yeah. No, not
yeah. This?
No. So on the 3 dots, maybe on the 3 dots.
Okay. Add pane. insert down,
That's
and then
let me check.
like console like here.
I can't remember either. Yeah, you got it. It was there.
Okay. All right, let's see. This is going to play nice. So
It was before.
let me do, I'm just gonna refresh this whole thing and try to see if I broke the UI somehow that I can get back. I could have sworn that in here,
You see,
no, I
this
don't
is
want
the
that.
console of Replit.
Right, that's what I want, I thought. This is, they must have changed this recently, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So if I
different.
say,
Mm.
3 plus 3, 2 plus 2. Huh. Clear, get rid of all, what is this doing? So this used to be the way that I would console log things. And what am I
Go to
doing
the
wrong?
developer tools, and then you see,
Like my developer tools for the whole page here?
no,
Oh, they changed it back finally. Okay.
developer tools on
This used to have to
this
be,
tool.
even like earlier this week, I thought you had to, do it in their built-in console log. That's so much better. Okay. Sorry, didn't know about this change. Okay, so now we know what each of these numbers are. But if we want to start to think about how to put these in each, to check the state, just gonna hide that again for now. We're gonna need to figure out which of the states we want to update. So if we look at our current state here, I want to also console log current counters. And so I get this back in here and I adjust this. You can see there's each of these current counts is stored, but we're going to need to find a way to figure out which one we want to adjust here. So we know that the new value is a 0, but the value of which one? And so -7, but again, -7, which one of these should we switch to -7? So we're going to have to just quickly do a little trick that I think is confusing to a lot of people, but I'm just going to gloss over it for now because I think we should talk more about special things about mapping later. But the second argument, when you do a callback to map, is the index of the item that you are passing in. So now if we want to, I can make the handle counter change know about what index it is as well as the value. So this looks funky. I have to make a wrapper function here, and I have to take the event, and what I have to do is call handle counter change, and I need to now pass the event, but also the counter index. And this is weird, but this is going to allow us to know both the event that was triggered by the interaction, which gives us the value, and the count index, which tells us which one of these counters was changed. What state does it correspond to? So this is going to go up here where I say event and counter index. So now child component counter index changed. And so what we should see here is that every time we update one of these, whoops, count index is not defined. Sorry. counter index, count index, counter index. Just bad copy paste. So now each one of these is going to tell us which of its parents. Let me filter this. Can I do user inputs only? There's some way to leave out all this extra junk.
There's a
Sidebar.
little filter box,
Yes, here.
like right above that.
It's, I think it's a circle on the left. Near the top.
This here?
No, another one, left hand side. Yeah.
Okay, so that clears everything. No user messages. I want to have, okay, here's only the user messages, so I can click that. Okay. So now we changed this to 0, 1, 2, but the important thing also is that we know it was component 0. And if we go down here, we will know that it's component 2. So this is a very weird thing that you have to do sometimes, but you just have to trust me on this for now. And I promise I will come back and teach a lot more about how map works and why exactly this is the case. But this is going to be the thing that lets us get access to what state we want to start to change. So we've got this child component changed. So now we can start to think about, we want to think about use state. No, not use state. We want to, what is this called? We want to call our set current counters. So we're going to set current counters. And what we need to pass into this is we need to be able to see the previous version of our current counters and modify that from there. So I'm just going to make a copy next counters, and that's going to be current counters spread. This is one way of making a copy. You might also see people do stuff like object assign, and then current counters like that. So there's multiple ways to do this, but I think the most common one is to use the spread operator. What this means is to take every element in this array and put copies of them inside of this array. So we need to make a copy here. If we were to modify the original one, it can be weird bugs. And Fanny, that's what we were talking about. Oh, she left. Okay. So I know this is in a weird state right now, but I'm gonna do something here that just says, I'm gonna make an object here and we're gonna give it most recent update. And that's gonna say the event target dot value. So, and this is going to say the index, and that will equal the counter index. So what we're trying to do is gradually change the state so that we can get to the point where we're updating all of these things in the parent. Current counters dot map. Oh yeah, current counters has to be an array, so I can't. I'll just give it, I'm just going to wrap this in an array for now. Most recent update. This goes here. These things can start to get ugly sometimes when you have to figure out where the where the different brackets and everything are going. All right. So this is going to break because this is not inside of an object. So if I take that out and then set current counters, most recent update, this will go here. All right. So again, I'm sorry, this is pretty messy right now. So 57 specs, comma, not a semicolon. All right. So hopefully now, when we do this, it's going to update to say which child component changed and what its new count is. And since we only have one thing in the array right now, it's not going to be able to have more than one counter here. So that is not a good solution to this. Maybe I should just have set a new variable or continue console logging it. But let me take a step back. We are going to take each event that gets passed into handle counter change, and we want to set current counters and adjust what our next counters is going to be. So what we need to do is update something at the counter index, and we're going to adjust what actually is in there. So next counters dot counter index dot current count equals event.target.value. And hopefully now when I set current counters to next counters, what it should do is actually update the right thing inside of our state here. So let's see if that can happen. So I'll refresh this to get back to the 4 that we start with. And I get that up to 8. Each one of these should say component 1 changed to each count. Oh my God, what a mess. I want only the messages, the user messages. So child component, we changed count 1 and 0 to 1 and 2. So, okay, this is a problem because this is a string right now, but we were finally able to have each one of these that we change properly update in the state. So when I say 99 here, so 2 was changed to this new count. And then when we go in here, 2 knows that its current value is 9999. So finally, we have the ability to keep track of all of the different states that change all in one place. And the thing about that is then we can finally look at that state and, for example, send it to the children for different reasons, or do what we were talking about here and take the total of all of them. So that's a good place for me to ask for questions, because I know there's going to be, that was a very confusing bit to go through. So what parts of that make sense and what parts don't?
So I think this is a bit like more advanced than where I'm at right now, but it all pretty much makes sense. I'm sure like once I start working with it, it's gonna make more sense to me. But I think like the newest thing is the dot dot dot
Okay, to make the
current
copy.
counters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but other than that, like I understand it.
Okay, and can you tell where this index is coming into play, so that each time we handle the counter change, we get the event, which will give us the value, and we get where it came from, because we've got the counter index being passed in here as well. And because the map knows where in the index this function was created and mapped, that's what lets us differentiate between each one of these different counters to have their own place that they update the state.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, and I know it's a little bit strange. How about you, Oksana? I know that was a lot. I feel like that wasn't a very good. I'm not very happy with that demo. But what are you thinking about right now?
I think that I will need to rewatch it.
Yeah, and I hope that I'm not jumping ahead here, because I don't see all of the resources and stuff. So maybe I need to go and look at exactly.
No, this
what
is a good example. It's just I think that after the spread operator, I'm kind of
okay.
lost a little bit.
Well,
Maybe a couple
yeah.
steps back. Yeah, just
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing we could do is basically we're making a new copy, and then we're saying in this item here, we're saying the counter index is going to tell us which one of these we are updating, and then we're updating the current count. So the counter index, say for example, index 2, and then the event target to match the input. So then this could be like 88888 or so basically why this has to get so complicated is because now instead of tracking, each component goes, oh, I'm a number, oh, I'm a number, oh, I'm a number, and they track it, and they know only about their own number. When the parent wants to keep track of potentially infinite counters, we could increase this to be 100 different counters, and the parent component would be able to index in for each one of these to know what just got updated. And so maybe a better way to also show this would be, yeah, we want to get that current counter, so that's good. But what we also could do, current counters dot map, and then we could say for each one of these, we just want to render a div. And then we will say we want to, why did this not work? Counter, current counters. Oh yeah. So now when we save this, we should get several counters up here. Oh, I didn't say return. So we're going to have 4 counters, and each one of these is going to know its index, and that will be from here as well. So each one of these now knows what index it is, and it also is going to know what its count is. So hopefully that will work. And then what you can do, I just want to make like a this is not the right way to do this, but I just want to like get something, some white space in between here. Does that work?
Darga, can you give example maybe
Yeah.
where it's usually used, like in real web application, anywhere in maybe online store components? Oh,
Yeah, here. Okay, that makes sense. Let me show you another filter component demo. So this is something for a different lecture, but what we want to do here is build up a bunch of animals from some data. And so we've got a bunch of animals and their names and their species, and it says all here. When I click on the penguin, it filters down what the map is to only show us things that have the same species. Same for if I'm a cat, same for dog. So this is something that you'll probably get into later, where you are filtering something when you need to delete a certain one of your to-do list items. For example, you might have the ability to filter things out. But each one of these is able to be filtered before we put it into the map. And so as a result of that, you often will find, and it's actually this other forget the name of my REPL here. But you use this very often when you're trying to delete something or modify something that's in a list. So what we can do,
okay. Is it used in a shopping cart when you add items? Or
it could be, yeah. So this one is going to show a list of people, and this is like a friends list. So we could also imagine that these are items in a shopping cart. That's a good example. And so for every person in here, we're rendering a person component, and it shows us their name and their age. But the other important thing that this does is by handle delete, we are going to, again, pass in the person index, and we're going to know this. Sorry, this is another way of doing the set where you do it as a function. I didn't want to get into this yet, but we are able to take the old previous people and we're going to filter it down by removing everybody who matches the index that was just passed in. So when I click Fiona and say unfriend, she disappears from the state because we found the index where she was and where I clicked, and then we filtered out that element. And so by clicking unfriend on everyone, we'd eventually end up with a fully empty friends list here. And similarly, if we wanted to modify a quantity, like if this was a checkout in a store, like you said, maybe these are different items that we're buying, and I could have different buttons to modify the quantity. I could have something here to say remove from cart. I could say add to favorites. Those are all things that we might want to have each object know about, where, for example, there's like a name that we can adjust. There's a is favorite. There is a quantity that starts at 0. So like we would start adding more things into the state, and that would be stuff that we could modify. And for each one of these have a lifted state that is in the parent. And so again, we have the app and it's people and set people. And then we could have, for example, handle add friend. And then we'd have to pass in like, we'd have to set people with the new value of the friend at the bottom of the list. And we could also have function add to favorites. And that would modify the state to only update the one item. So add a new friend object to the state at the bottom of the list. And here we would find the friend in the state at the index matching the element we were the element the user interacting with. So this would update its favorite, but we could have a separate function handler for updating any other data on that person state. So you'll see things like this pretty often where you have to do something specifically to one of the elements. And maybe it would make sense, like if I told you instead of person index, if I just had this be 0 every time and I hard code it to 0, what's going to happen? So Adam is at 0. If I unfriend Carissa, it's actually going to delete Adam and keep Carissa. I'm going to unfriend Edward, it's going to delete Bay. So this is telling us what person should we modify or delete. And by using this person index, this is what's going to allow us to match up our change that we make with the button that we clicked. So India, Wang, Fiona, Edward, Bay. So each time you do this, it's very common when you're rendering a list of things to need to interact with a particular one, especially when you're mapping like this and it's data driven. We need to know not to just delete a random person or modify a random person. So it's like if we want to say on toggle favorites, we would have, again, something in here that would handle toggle favorites, and that would be the person index as well. And then when we want to say on change name, that would also be another function here that is going to say handle change name, and again we have to pass the person index. So it's a very common thing. It's weird, but it's very common to only want to interact with one of the elements in an array. And I think you're going to get into some of this with your to-do list, where eventually they're probably going to want you to be able to mark things as completed or change their name. And so again, like you'd have here, mark completed or complete task, on complete task. And that would give you another function here, a wrapper function, and you'd say handle complete task, and you pass it task index. So you're very often giving these callbacks an index so that they know where to do the thing. And so for each one of these, it's very likely that you would have to, when you're adding new functionality, to modify the person or modify the thing in the cart, you want to use this sort of mapping that relies on the index. So maybe what we can do, well, let's see, what time is it? I know we're probably supposed to go. I could try doing another demo of this either now or later. That would be a store specifically, if that metaphor would help. And then we could sort of do some of this same thing and think about how we would adjust it.
Yeah, it will be very helpful because it's very popular thing to
Yeah.
I think that it just will help to the things which you usually see and how to
Yeah.
process them, how they used in not like a counter or just in real life.
Yeah. I
Thank
think that makes sense. Maybe that's a more practical. Yeah. I was trying to do kind of the same thing with this friends list idea. Let me fork this so that I keep these notes. And so, the act of raising, lifting the state often means combining the state into a larger object or an array. And because of that, we can really get in a complicated state where we've got to do a lot of like being sure who we are modifying, because everything in the state, we have access to all of the objects. And if we accidentally delete them, or we could set all of them to 99, even though you only changed one of them. And so that's sort of what's going on here. But I'll try to come up with a better way of explaining this as well.
we have better control, right? Like
Yes. If I didn't have this person index here to tell me who I'm going to delete, where is that here? Handle delete. Did I remove that? Oh, here we go. Index to delete. If we didn't have this index to delete, and again, I were to just say, I could filter this instead by return person.name not equal to Adam. So if we do this now, what will happen is that no matter who I click, everyone but Adam should get deleted. Person component index, person.name. Well, that did not work. Did Adam get deleted? Okay, Adam got deleted. I'm sorry. So I did that the opposite way I meant to. So now if I click anywhere, everybody who's not Adam will get deleted. Or if I just return true from this, or if I return false from this, actually, everybody will get deleted if I filter it wrong. So this is what allows us to have an accurate mapping between our components and our state, so that when I delete this person, the right person gets deleted and not just everybody. And if I do it this way, then anytime I delete someone else, I'll actually delete Adam instead. So by doing it this way, it gets more complicated. But now what this is telling us is that we're deleting specifically the index that we clicked on. And so if I go back to this filter, I'm deleting each one as I click them. So I'll come up with a better way to explain this, but I think it is a very common thing that you have to do anytime you want to be data driven by like having things, having an array of data and then rendering that data, but then also wanting to have specific specific changes that you can make to the state via interactions here. And if we were doing an API call or something, it would probably, you know, we might not even need to have this state in here. Maybe we would be sending it to the server, fetching it to the server, and then passing it back as a prop or something. So sometimes these examples, even though we're trying to make them realistic, can still be less realistic for like a really large company's kind of app. Because if I'm on Amazon and I delete something from my cart, that probably sends a request to the server that removes it from my cart on like every computer, not just my local computer. So that's where things also start to get more, where these examples can be a little bit inaccurate to real life with like a full stack application.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, I will send out some stuff tomorrow to just like kind of try to sum up this a little bit, and hopefully we'll have some videos as well. But think of questions that you have and you can message them to me, like if you're like laying in bed and you're thinking of like, why didn't that make sense, why didn't that make sense, you can message me on Slack and ask questions there, or we can do some one-on-one sessions as well.
Okay, thank you, Darga.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
No problem. Thank you for staying extra time. Eva, nice to meet you, and I hope we'll see you again. But also, if you're like, yeah, I'm not coming back to these anymore, that also makes sense. This was a bit of a confusing one. But it's similar to you. You know, please let me know if you get stuck on anything with your current project and on your assignment. I'll be around.
Thank you so much. You are good at explaining things. I'm just like definitely not there yet, but you're good.
Thank you. This is one where I can feel in my bones that I'm not, there's something wrong with the explanation, that I'm still trying to figure out how to fix it better. But it's one of those things that's just like maybe a little bit confusing to everybody at first. And I know it was very confusing to me as well. So sometimes React just sort of says to us like, yeah, you got to trust me, do it this weird way and it'll work. And then we just kind of get used to doing it a weird way and not always understand it perfectly. So I'm going to work on that. But
yeah, you're good.
No, it's okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Darga. Thank you.
Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you on Slack or see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
You.
Have a nice weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.